We have a question and answer segment because I know that you may have some burning questions. We can't take all of them, and we have prepared some as well. And we have the very fashion-forward man who's always asking the hard-hitting questions to lead that section. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Raymond Pryce.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my duty and an honor on your behalf to pose these questions to the Honorable Mayor Amor Mottley. Good evening, Prime Minister.
Good evening, Raymond.
First name. Good evening.
Well, I only have one first name too, so call me Mayor.
I shall, Prime Minister, not call you Mayor.
You are obviously a disobedient man. Does your leader know that?
No, if among the books that you would author, or which would be authored about the time in which you are Prime Minister of Barbados, were to be entitled, would you choose The Politics of Change, or would you choose Politics Has Changed?
Neither.
Which one would you choose?
The politics of change for me helped shape a lot of my perspective on politics in the Caribbean, politics in a third world country, the recognition that there has to be fundamental transformation of us as a people. And we're hard on ourselves because we are not yet 100 years independent. And we've done so much already without necessarily the tribulations and civil war that others have had to endure to get there. But I genuinely believe that I would have loved to be able to come in at a time where I could play every shot in the game, and to really embrace transformation as at the core. But I have come to understand that the development of resilience, more than anything else at the time in which we live, is going to be required of us, because none of us can predict the future. I came to office in May 2018. Within 6 days, I went to the International Monetary Fund. And tonight, there's so many other things that I wanted to talk about, but for time, I didn't. I told the then Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, that tomorrow we are going to announce selective credit default of our debt, domestic and external, and that we're coming to the International Monetary Fund because Barbados' debt to GDP is 177% when we include the 19% of arrears that have not been paid in some instances for almost 5 years. We were the third most indebted country, debt to GDP per capita in the world, when we took over. The first morning after Cabinet was sworn in, we met with the social partnership. And I had a simple question. Who in here wants to save the Barbados dollar? And of course, everybody put up the hand. And then I said, everybody write down the top 3 to 5 reasons. And at the end of the day, there was 80% agreement on the steps to be taken. When I spoke to Madame Lagarde, I said, look, I said, this is not an easy decision, but I must tell you, before you carry people on a long journey, you got to give them a little breakfast. And she was very respectful, and she said, I'll send somebody on Sunday, I'll speak tomorrow when you announce, and by Sunday in 48 hours, you'll have somebody. It turned out to be Bert, who was here in Jamaica, and for whom that experience helped us considerably, because he was not coming as a neophyte to the region. 2 weeks later, I gave the first budget, and they then understood that we were not joking. Barbados then had to undergo a $1 billion adjustment, which effectively was just about 10-11% of GDP. We restructured our domestic debt within 3 months. We settled the IMF program within 3 months, driven by a homegrown program that we had prepared when in opposition. We polled the Barbadian public on the state-owned enterprises because the then governor of the central bank felt that we should have sent home 4,000 to 5,000 people, which would be the equivalent of about 1 in every 4 public servants. Totally, totally unacceptable. And we developed a simple message, an approach. We're going to share the burden, but we're going to share the bounty. And we believe that that bounty might come soon again. Little did we know, it took us another year to restructure the external debt. We finished restructuring the external debt in December 2019. I don't need to tell you what happened in January 2020. It was COVID. And from COVID, we then went in 2020 to more lockdown in 2021. And the week when we, from December 31st, imagine having to lock down a country All Year's Day, New Year's Eve, at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was not a pleasant act. But by April, when we were opening up again, we then had the ashfall from St. Vincent, which, the volcano there, which shut down the Bridgetown port for 7 days and shut down our airport for 9 days.
Yes.
2 weeks later, we had, 6 weeks later, we had a freak storm that if I was not up, I would not have believed it. I had 46,000 lightning strikes in less than 2 hours. And 2 weeks later, we had our first hurricane. Not devastating, but bad enough in 66 years. I say all of these things because my time in office has only known crisis. And the only way you get through crisis is by developing and being resilient. We stand here because our ancestors were resilient enough to fight off and to do whatever it took for them to secure the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So that as we wait for the birthing of this new world order, I believe that the name of the book has to be being the most and best resilient version of ourselves. Now that's an inadequate, unpoetic way of saying it, and I'm sure we can find a more poetic way of saying that, but that's the message.
Prime Minister, in your presentation just now, you used the word dignity on several occasions. Insofar as dignity is a qualitative and therefore subjective parameter, is there value in the pursuit of policies based on achieving dignity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, we accept that people got to feel good about themselves individually and collectively as a people. And in the same book, Michael Manley talks about the fact that our independence movement didn't come out of great wars. And therefore, we don't have the great wars that the Europeans and others will, and the Americans will rely on to be able to define their nationhood. But we have great wars that took place nevertheless because we know about them, but the story was never told. And that in many instances, we have tried as a people, as you have done here in Jamaica, to capture the leaders of the rebellion through slavery and through colonialism as persons who stood out and who led others who sacrificed their lives, and in some instances they did too. That really helped to define who we are. And when you read Marcus Garvey, and when you listen to much of Bob's work, what is it that they're really telling us? They're reinforcing the dignity of who we are as a people. And when we say look in the mirror and like who you see in the mirror, that's really about assuring yourself that you're affording yourself a dignity that is important. In our own case in Barbados, one of the first things we did when coming to office, even in an IMF program, and this is the point that I want to make, because there's this notion that all fund programs are bad. That's not been our experience. In an IMF program, we were immediately, within 2 weeks of announcing to her, before settling the program, we reintroduced tertiary education, free to all Bajans at the University of the West Indies. We refleeted the transport board. We had not bought buses for 13 years. We bought sanitation trucks that had not been bought for 10 years. We built a new accident and emergency. We gave a 5% wage increase immediately, and since then, while still in the program as we are, 2 more wage increases, given 3 at a time they had only received 1 10 years prior to our coming to office. We created Golden Square, and for those who have not visited Barbados, Golden Square was where the 1937 rebellion and revolution took place. That's where Clement Payne was taken from. That's where the speeches were. And for many years, we used to have to go in the corner of Golden Square, in the back of a little corner, and hide and put down flowers and pay tribute. I said, no, open up the square and make it available to the entire country. And we have a wall that embraces the name, last name of every single Bajan that ever lived in the country. And for those whose last name we don't know because they were slaves and not given a name, we put names of the slaves that we know on that wall to pay tribute, because it is important that those little boys and girls who come and walk through Golden Square know that they come from somewhere, and know that they have a proud history, and know that dignity is to be afforded to each and every one. So I can't even begin. And that is what the legacy of Michael Manley and Errol Barrow and Grantley Adams and Norman Manley and all of those great Caribbean titles. But forget the politicians. Let's deal with the artists and the writers. That's what they have forged in us when given the opportunity to be able to tell our own story and to imagine our own possibilities.
Now, the next question covers my area of professional pursuits: environment, sustainable energy, climate change. To the extent that your emphasis on mainstreaming climate change and the impacts of global warming
Fighting the climate crisis.
Climate crisis, yes, you renamed it, and it's appropriate that you have. To the extent that you have placed climate crisis as a centerpiece of international politics, and that could place you at the epicenter of the pushback from powerful companies and nations in the North. Why are you still unafraid to do that, if indeed such an outcome of a pushback against Mayor Mottley is likely?
Because it's not about Mayor Mottley, 1. And 2, because I genuinely believe that we will find common purpose. The question is, how long will it take for us to do so, and how many people will be sacrificed before we do so? Humanity does not allow evil to triumph ultimately. It may take a little longer, but we get there. And I genuinely believe that what is needed is actually more conversation rather than less talking at and talking about. We need to talk with each other. Because if we start to talk with each other, just as I did that first morning after the cabinet was sworn in with the social partnership, what is it that unites us? Who in here wants to save the dollar? Who in here wants to save the planet? And how are we going to do so? We may differ as to the causes, but we can also find common purpose as to some of the solutions, even if we have different reasons for believing why those solutions are appropriate. Some may see it purely as a financial opportunity with the green revolution because there is money to be made in the green transition. Some may feel that it is because it is the right thing to do. Whatever motivates you, my simple interest is that we take the action to adapt, to become more resilient, to mitigate, and to do the things that will allow lives and livelihoods to be saved.
Prime Minister, this question is from a Bajan in the audience who lives here in Jamaica. How do we engage our young people in nation building and culture building within a space where they are increasingly disillusioned and disaffected by politics, economics, and their own ability to find success in their home islands or within CARICOM?
I think that, to begin with, we have to recognize that there is place and opportunity. and that in many instances we need to talk with and nurture our young people in close quarter so that they do not feel irrelevant to the process. I also feel strongly that we have to give opportunities, and in fact the biggest problem in the region now is ironic. I don't go to sleep worrying about reserves anymore. I go to sleep worrying about skills deficit. And country by country by country, because of the aging and declining population, has in the region to contend with this issue. It is against that backdrop, therefore, there is going to be naturally many opportunities for young people. And the question is, have they been trained for the specific areas for which these opportunities occur? We, for example, have recognized that there has to be conversations with the university and other institutions to perhaps better tailor to the needs of our emerging economies, areas of activity that we cannot disregard, coastal infrastructure, a whole host of things that we just talked about in terms of sustainable expression and things. We have also a global audience when it comes to the creation of cultural assets or to the expression of our sporting activities, as you know well here in Jamaican athletics, as we know in cricket, or certainly continue to try to know.
And in music with Rihanna.
Ecosystem, music, etc. But also the professions, also in diplomacy. I mean, there's so many other areas. And that's why I keep using the phrase global citizens, but with Caribbean roots. So it is easy to look at a glass and believe it is half empty. I believe you should look at it and see that it is half full. And I believe that there are opportunities in this region. I do believe that we have to do a better job at building out a society for our young people while protecting our elderly in the society. Because if our young people choose to leave, then we have no one to build. And in a very real sense, it is for them that we are building out our nations and trying to save the earth. So I say simply to that Bajan person that whether you're in Jamaica or Barbados, once you're building out the Caribbean civilization, that is what matters. And that's why I said earlier that there has to be a floor of rights below which no Caribbean citizen should fall. Because the truth is that the restrictions that we are putting on the movement of people really are almost a falsehood. Because we don't have the luxury of really that when we really need more people to come in and more people to build out our societies and economies at a higher level of activity than we've seen in the past.
You've practically answered the final question, which had come from the audience, which was, how can we fuel, if not refuel, a consciousness of the importance of regionalism among Caribbean youth who could, among other labels, be described as otherwise invested?
It's going to be a little more difficult because of the extent to which, as I said, narrowcasting and social media command their attention. But it's not impossible. We go to the schools as children. That's a commonplace. We play sports. We listen to Caribbean music. We look at other Caribbean cultural expressions. I believe that we have to be far more creative in using our soft power to be able to reinforce in our people that sense of Caribbeanness and oneness. And the truth is they have it. When the music plays, when the sports are doing well, there's there. But why haven't we translated that into the more formal areas where we interact with people? I don't know what happens here in Jamaica, but one of the things that concerns me is that our children are full of energy and expression if they are outside of the classroom, outside of the church, outside of the workplace. So what is it that those locations are doing to creativity and to expression that we need to take a look ourselves again to ensure that we're not dulling or suppressing things that we ought to be nurturing and placing guardrails to encourage? And this is not the effort of a government alone. This is the effort of a people.
check.
Last point. He talks about having a major national project, and in his case, it was fighting illiteracy. I say in Barbados that we are small enough to be able to fight poverty. The poverty indices show that 1 in every 5 Bajan families, last time there was a formal report, and we're waiting for a new one now, had gone from 13% to 20% just before we came into government. But what does that mean? If 1 in every 5 are below the poverty line, what is it really telling us? That 4 out of every 5 are above it. And that if we were to come together to help each other, you talk about the share pot here in the tenement yard, we talk about it in the context of our villages in terms of what lifted us up. If we were to come together and recognize that removing people from poverty is, yes, first an economic activity, but it is also about the social ills. It is also about other things that contribute to people remaining in poverty. And a government, while it plays a critical role in nurturing the policies and facilitating the opportunities that are necessary for people, it cannot do it alone without the other institutions in civil society, from the family to the church, to the mosque, to Rastafari, to whoever, to sports, to cultural activity. And that we have to move our people first and foremost from dependence as a result of poverty to independence, but then to the final stage of giving back in the form of interdependence. And that's not going to happen in 2 or 3 years. That's a 10, 15-year exercise minimum for most families. Some may come out a little quicker, some will need the extra time. And therefore, I really do believe that in setting these national projects, that we recognize that we need to go wider than just government, and we need to find that space where nationhood imposes on us a responsibility to duty that goes beyond duty to self, duty to family, and duty to job, because those fall within the individual pursuit of happiness. But it is in the broader duties that we build the nation, and that we strengthen the people, and that we develop the resilience that we can fight anything that comes our way. And it's not going to happen simply because we say it, and it's not going to happen overnight, but we must stay the course, and we must pass the baton in the relay until the battle is over.
Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Mayor Mottley, our lecturer today at the Michael Manley Centenary.